Rock and roll, homies. We now have a lot of shit going on. So here, let me just get some shit started over here. If you'll notice, if you're watching live, on most platforms I got a message right now that shows that I got TTS. And it is up and working. Should be at least. Pets. Alright. We got the newest shit up here. Let me go and do something over here real quick. Lee. And then also go over here. Go to my channel here. Gonna mute this quickly just so, okay, yeah, it's already muted. Copy. So we're gonna copy that, and then we're gonna do us one of these. I gotta make sure I mute this in time. Yeah. Pin message. Rock and roll. Okay. So, we are live. Welcome everyone. And today, we are just going to be chilling out, watching some videos. If you'd like to leave an on-screen donation, the TTS is in the chat below. Just click the link. I think you only need $1 or $2 for like 3 minutes, $5 for, I don't even know, 60 seconds, so like 8.5 minutes. So, yeah. If anybody wants to do that, feel free. If not, that's fine too. The option is yours. And that is, well, that's the magical part. That is the magical part, my friends. Without further ado, let's get started.
If buying isn't owning, then piracy isn't stealing, which is why piracy is no longer seen as digital theft.
I'm going to do a test TTS, so if you see one pop up, it's not real, I just did this.
Now it's easier and more convenient than ever. TV, movies, sports, live events, whatever you want for free. It's become so normalized that piracy sites are getting more yearly visits than every streaming service combined. But this makes sense when you consider that every facet of the entertainment industry has been destroyed by corporations. Even if you're not a sports fan, you will relate to this struggle, because you need to see how insanely difficult it is just to watch a basketball game. I live in Oklahoma City, and I really wanted to follow the Thunder and the entire Western Conference a couple years ago, so I bought NBA League Pass for $110 for the season. Silly me for thinking that one streaming service would have every game. League Pass only lets you watch games that are out of market, which meant I couldn't actually watch the Thunder games because I live in Oklahoma City, and those rights belong to the FanDuel Sports Network. And if the game was nationally televised, that was exclusively broadcast on ESPN or TNT, which meant I needed a cable package or another app like Hulu Live or Sling just to catch the games literally
Well, that's the truth, bro. Honestly, that's the convenience that's going to topple the cable industry. That's the honest truth.
City. As of right now, if you want to guarantee that you will be able to watch all of the NBA games in the US when they are actually happening live, you need to have ESPN, which requires you to have Hulu plus Live TV or YouTube TV or Sling Orange TV or with an upgraded cable package. Then you need Peacock, which is $11 per month. Then you need Prime Video, which is $9 per month, and ABC, which would come with your basic local cable subscription.
Hell yeah.
The cheapest way to guarantee every game would be $66 in subscriptions and whatever your basic cable costs these days, which is on average about $25. So roughly $91 per month just to watch basketball, the cheapest. Now, me personally, I would never pirate anything. That is behavior I absolutely condemn. But I'm not surprised anyone who would do it when all you got to do is go to one of the many widely available free websites, click the extremely clean and clear interface that says the exact game or event you are looking for, and just watch it for free. But honestly, we should have seen this terrible streaming climate coming from a mile away, because as they say, nothing good lasts forever. And to understand why piracy is so rampant today, we have to understand this detailed list of problems that piracy solves. Netflix used to be $8 per month, and it had a deep catalog of some of the most popular shows ever made. The Office, Friends, Breaking Bad, Dexter, Family Guy, American Horror Story, Pretty Little Liars, Law and Order, and even some Disney and Pixar titles. They had the Harry Potter films, they had Star Wars, they had classic movies like Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather, The Dark Knight. They even had Marvel titles before Disney Plus launched. It felt limitless, like the entire entertainment industry was in one app for the price of a fast food meal. Today, $8.99 gets you 9,000 shows you will never watch, and that's with ads. And if you don't want ads, no problem. That's $25 a month. Plus, every studio with a morsel of valuable IP decided to make their own app. So instead of one library, you get 10 half libraries, each charging you separately. HBO Max, $21 a month. Hulu and Disney Plus, $19 a month. Peacock, $17. Apple TV Plus, Paramount Plus, Discovery Plus, Stars Play, BritBox, and niche ones like Shudder, Crunchyroll, Acorn TV all jumped into the fight, each charging $4 to $20 a month. I sometimes have this thought like,
Acorn TV, yo, that's the platform I choose.
Streaming services grouped together, and then I realize that's kind of what cable was. But streaming was supposed to be the solution to cable's outlandish prices and bloated packages, and yet they are slowly turning into the very thing they sought to destroy. Check out this old residential cable service price sheet from 1993. Just your basic news and weather channels was the same cost as Netflix when they first launched. Adding just 2 or 3 premium channels like the Disney Channel takes the price from $8 to $20 to $27 per month. This is actually insanely expensive for the 90s, especially when you consider that you did not get to choose what content to watch or when you could watch it. And of course, you still had commercials. Streaming solved all of these problems, but in 2025, almost all of these problems are back. I recently wanted to watch The Founder after doing research for my fast food video, but Netflix would not allow me to watch it since I pay for the cheapest version of Netflix that has ads. I was annoyed, but I thought maybe it had something
a great
to do
movie,
with
by the way.
McDonald's having some sort
Fantastic
of strict
film.
licensing issue that forced Netflix to lock it behind the premium tier, but it turns out there are 138 movies and TV series blocked on Netflix advertising tier. For $8 per month, you cannot watch Spider-Man, White Chicks, Boys in the Hood, or even the Garfield movie. Half the time, you don't even know whether something isn't available.
I didn't know that.
Because of
That's
licensing
terrible.
contracts, region restrictions.
I didn't
or
know
just
that there
because
were
you're on the
libraries
wrong
locked off.
subscription plan. The end result feels exactly like cable again, paying more money just to unlock what you thought you were already paying for, thus making piracy the logical solution. You can go to these super cool websites that I never endorse because that is wrong and immoral, and just search basically any movie and get a high definition download. However, cable being much more expensive actually did
Dude, I ain't
have a
even gonna
slight
front, bro.
benefit that nobody realized.
Anybody
at the
who's
time.
anybody
The competition
knows.
for ratings meant that the shows that survived were
Anybody
usually the
who's
best of the
anybody who
best. Every
knows.
network was fighting for limited primetime slots, and if a show could not pull in millions of viewers week after week, it was canceled. There was no filler at primetime. Seinfeld, Friends, The Simpsons, The X-Files, Sex and the City, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I could go on and on. Networks weren't pumping out hundreds of new series every year just to fill catalog space.
Ugh.
They were making sure the few shows they produced had the writing, acting, and budgets to succeed. And to no surprise at all, these old shows are still dominating streaming services today. In 2022, Seinfeld racked up 19.3 billion viewing minutes on Netflix, making it the 10th most watched show of that year. Compare that to one of their most
Seinfeld's
popular
dope.
originals, Wednesday,
Love
which was
Seinfeld.
everywhere in 2022. Viral on TikTok, Jenna Ortega was launched into A-list fame. It was damn near a monoculture moment, yet it still drew fewer minutes than Seinfeld, a 30-year-old sitcom. Shows like The Umbrella Academy
That's
and
insane.
The Rings of Power pulled in about half the audience of Seinfeld.
I'm not really
Cable
surprised, though.
forced
Think about how many
networks
people
to
are just like
compete for your attention
Seinfeld.
in a way that
Fuck
streaming
everything
doesn't.
else,
To take that one step
Seinfeld. I don't even
further,
blame 'em.
today shows and movies are
Seinfeld, just,
literally
like, clicking
designed
with their
knowing
remote.
that people
Seinfeld.
are not all the way paying attention to them. Netflix has leaned into what's called the second screen era, where
Seinfeld.
they assume that most viewers are watching TV TV while scrolling their phones, cooking, or doing laundry. Hollywood writer, director, and producer Justine Bateman said, "I've heard from showrunners who are given notes from the streamers that this isn't second screen enough." Which begs the question, why would someone give all of their attention to something that is only designed to be consumed with half of their attention? According to reports, Netflix execs are urging screenwriters to have characters announce their actions out loud so that viewers can follow along without looking at the screen. For example, "We spent a day together," Lohan tells her lover James in Irish Wish. "I admit it was a beautiful day filled with dramatic vistas and romantic rain, but that doesn't give you the right to question my life choices. Tomorrow I'm marrying Paul Kennedy." "Fine," he responds. "That will be the last you see of me because after this job is over, I'm off to Bolivia to photograph an endangered tree lizard." This kind of over-explaining feels completely unnatural, and real people don't talk like this. It makes what should feel cinematic like a boring audiobook. And look, I'm all for casual viewing. I know a ton of my audience casually watches my videos while doing other things. But also, I make low-budget YouTube videos that are free to watch, not multi-million-dollar films behind a paywall. I don't know about you, but when I watch a movie, I like to pay attention. By training viewers to expect content that doesn't demand their full attention, Netflix is creating an audience that's even less likely to pay attention. And the less they pay attention, the less they care about quality. And as long as they feel just entertained enough, means they likely won't cancel their subscription. It's almost like they are conditioning the perfect audience who will barely pay attention to their content or their credit card bill so they can increase prices while lowering the quality for an audience.
This is a genuinely crazy take, but I kind of agree with it.
Excellent to survive. Well, not forever actually. This started to die in the 2000s. Once cable became the dominant form of television in America, the few companies at the top could now take advantage of their market dominance.
Exactly.
Cable prices climbed 40% in just 6 years, jumping from about $34
used to be like $50,
to $47 in 2006. Meanwhile, inflation only rose 14.3%.
Near like 2010, it's like $200.
Such as
like,
Comcast, Spectrum, Dish, DirecTV,
what happened to the prices there?
Started bundling networks into giant packages with hundreds, sometimes thousands of channels. If you wanted to watch ESPN, you were forced to also buy Lifetime, QVC, the Golf Channel, MTV3, and whatever else they decided to shove into the bundle. You weren't allowed to just pick the 5 or 6 channels that you actually watched. And now, streaming companies are doing a similar tactic. They flood their platforms with new shows and movies you will never watch because adding volume creates the illusion of value, justifying their increasing price. Netflix alone released 589 new Netflix originals in 2024, just slightly over its 2023 total of 568. There can't possibly be nearly 600 new shows and movies worth watching every year, but it's all part of the bigger plan. Every year, Netflix originals slowly take up more of their catalog, and then they license less. In 2022, over 50% of their catalog was originals. Now, some of these originals are good. Ozark, Queen's Gambit,
God damn it, these ads. Nobody wants them. Not a single person. Not a single fucking person.
When football makes you hungry, get deals all season long on Uber Eats.
Beef are just a few off the top of my head, but the rest are mostly filler. They are watering down their product to save money instead of purchasing valuable shows, because licensing the movies and TV shows you actually want to watch cost a fortune. In 2019, Netflix lost both Friends and The Office, two classic, reliable sitcoms that were some of the most watched shows on their platform, after Warner Media and NBC pulled the rights for their own services. To fill that gap, Netflix struck a massive deal to acquire Seinfeld, reportedly paying over $500 million for global streaming rights, and that's only for 5 years. So they would have to spend another fortune to keep the show. And this is the cycle we're stuck in now. Streamers don't want to pay billions to keep the classics that people actually want to watch, so they crank out repetitive, boring, low-budget originals that are literally designed for you to halfway pay attention to. Then they slowly raise the monthly price because look at all this new, fresh, original content we're giving you. And users have been conditioned to only watch watch casually anyways, so they barely notice the dip in quality. Plus, that's only one streaming service. Every company with a little bit of valuable IP started their own app, and they're doing the same exact system. So now if you want a library of great shows and movies, you need to subscribe to multiple services. The average household actively uses around 4 streaming apps, and 8% even access 10 or more. That equals about $69 per month, which is just about the same price that cable was in the early 2010s when everyone jumped to streaming. Piracy is the solution to all of these problems. Piracy reached a low in 2020 with 130 billion website visits, which by the way is still a ton, but by 2024 that number had risen to 216 billion, and it's actually incredibly simple as to why. Gabe Newell, the founder of the online video game marketplace Steam, summarized this perfectly nearly a decade ago.
Newell's
We think
like
there's
the
a fundamental
champion on this.
misconception about piracy. Piracy is almost always a service problem and not a pricing problem. If a pirate offers a product anywhere in the world, 24/7, purchasable from the convenience of your personal computer, and the legal provider says that the product is region locked, will come to your country 3 months after the US release, and can only be purchased at a brick and mortar store, then the pirate service is more valuable. In short, convenience is key, and people are willing to pay, but why are they making it so complicated? The music industry got it right for the consumer. They created something so simple that it wasn't even necessary to pirate music anymore. At its peak, Napster had nearly 80 million registered users downloading and sharing music for free. By the mid-2000s, sites like LimeWire and BitTorrent were handling billions of illegal downloads every year. Year over year, music revenue sales were dropping, and the music industry executives were convinced it was because of piracy. That's when Spotify, Apple Music, and other music streaming services came around to essentially make the Netflix of music. However, these services are better because there is no exclusivity. No matter what service you pay for, you will have access to basically the same exact music as any other platform. One monthly price and nearly every song and album ever made. Now, this isn't necessarily all good. This has devalued music incredibly, and artists get fractions of a penny per stream, but unfortunately, the customer doesn't care because the service is better for them. But we might be at a tipping point with music streaming services because Spotify is seemingly taking a page out of Netflix playbook and prioritizing their own music over licensed music, but the problem is it's AI generated, but that's a whole different video. Compared to now, it seems like in the early 2010s, streaming services had it right. All they had to do was not change. Piracy was at an all-time low in the early 2010s because it was safer, easier, and not a financial burden to just pay for the content you wanted to watch. Now, there are always going to be people who simply don't want to or can't pay. This is extremely common with pay-per-view events. For many years, Dana White and the UFC waged war against sites like Crackstreams, trying to convince everyone that he would get them shut down.
You kind of stirred the pot a little bit with the piracy, the online streamers. They want to come after you and give this thing away. So, any regret in kind of maybe stirring the pot a little bit?
I'm glad you asked me about that because we got one. We got him. We're watching this guy right now. All you have to do is turn it on Saturday, and we got you. I can't wait. Turn it on Saturday, streamers, and see what happens.
Nothing happened. 4 years later, and you could watch any UFC fight crystal clear HD on a handful of different free streaming sites. Dana eventually realized he was losing the battle with illegal pay-per-view streamers, and to everyone's surprise, he actually made a deal that benefits the consumer now. In 2026, all UFC events will air exclusively on Paramount networks in the United States. That means 13 marquee numbered events and 30 fight nights will air via Paramount Plus. For $13 per month, you can get all the UFC events and all of Paramount's content ad-free. This is actually a monumental shift. For the first time ever, fans will have access to the fights at the lowest cost in history. But it's not all positive. Some suspect that this is the beginning of the UFC resorting to basically all the exact issues I have already raised with streaming services. Once the UFC moves fully to a streaming platform, they've got your money locked in, whether the card is stacked with superstars or filled with nobodies. That pressure to deliver massive must-see events disappears overnight. And honestly, that's already been happening in the past couple years. The storytelling is basically non-existent, cards are bloated with fighters nobody cares about, their upcoming talent pool is getting less impressive and exciting, but now the cost of 13 marquee events is roughly the same price as one pay-per-view. So as long as you get one good card per year, it's technically worth the subscription. They quite literally just cheapened their product, so we should expect the quality to decrease even more. Also, fighters have traditionally been paid based on pay-per-view points, meaning if the card card sold well, they got paid well. Once that model disappears, the UFC has to raise base pay for their top stars just to keep them happy. That makes those stars more expensive to book, so to save money, the UFC will inevitably have them fight less. Fewer high-profile matchups, more watered-down fight nights, and a whole lot of filler. Fans will pay less, but they also will get less. All of these companies across the entire entertainment industry, besides music, kinda, have overcomplicated their model of delivering content to customers for the sole purpose of squeezing every last dollar out of the end user. I believe most people are good people, and I don't think anyone expects to get quality entertainment for free. We were in a good sweet spot in the 2010s, but greed ruined it. Now the costs are higher, the content is worse, and the convenience is gone. I've canceled nearly all of my subscriptions or reduced to just the ad tier because I just don't watch as much, and I know I'm not alone. When the system no longer respects the consumer finds another way. That's why piracy doesn't feel like stealing anymore. It feels like the logical solution.
That's a freaking fact, though. And it's a damn shame, but it's true, you know? There's just not a really lot of good options when it comes to, like, what people should do in that respect. But okay, so we're gonna look up chilling scares. Chilling scares. We're gonna put all those videos. Ugh. Okay. 6 disturbing internet.
Angel of Death Challenge.
Well, that sounds cool.
On June 3rd, 2022, an 18-year-old teen tragically passed away after falling in front of a truck in Tangerang, Indonesia. However, what made this particular incident stand out among the dozens of traffic-related deaths on Indonesian roads every day was that this was not an accident. Instead, this was the result of one of the most disturbing internet trends that was sweeping the country during this time. It had actually started back in 2021, but exploded in popularity in mid-2022. The trend was called the Malaikat Maut Challenge, or the Angel of Death Challenge in English. It involved TikTokers, mainly teenagers, playing a game with oncoming traffic, particularly loaded trucks. Their goal was to run out onto a busy street in front of a truck, hope it stops before hitting them without flinching, and post the video of the stunt online. But completing this dangerous challenge successfully was a lot harder than many of its unfortunate participants realized. Most of them jumped onto the road as the truck got extremely close, giving the driver virtually no time to notice them and apply the brakes. But even when drivers had enough time to see the kids performing these stunts, they still couldn't slow down in time to prevent tragedy. Trucks usually carry heavy cargo, and that weight doesn't stop on a dime. The heavier the load, the longer the braking distance, sometimes stretching dozens of meters even after the brakes are fully pressed. So by the time the drivers reacted, it was already too late. Not to mention the fact that this trend was also putting the truck drivers at risk, both physically and psychologically. For one of these cases, involving a 14-year-old participating in this challenge, the driver fled the scene, likely out of fear of facing criminal charges. If he had instead stopped and cooperated, the footage the teenager's friends captured for TikTok would have proven his innocence. But by running away, he turned himself into a hit-and-run suspect, potentially jeopardizing his job and even his freedom depending on the charges he received. Following the incident in Tangerang, Indonesian police acted quickly to prevent further tragedies. They managed to stop 14 more kids from attempting the same dangerous stunt that very day and continued to monitor the city over the upcoming months. However, the attempts in Tangerang, Indonesia were only a small part of the global trend that cost several lives and left many others with life-altering injuries over the next year. Thankfully, TikTok eventually stepped in and removed all content related to the Angel of Death challenge. And since social media validation was the main reason participants took part in this dangerous trend, the platform's ban caused it to gradually fade into obscurity. Happy slapping. On the 21st of January 2005, the Tez magazine in the UK reported on a new trend spreading rapidly across the country, something they referred to as happy slapping. Contrary to its name, however, the trend was anything but happy. In essence, it involved people, often young adults or teenagers, going up to a random person, slapping them, recording their shocked reaction, and then sharing that video with others. Personal camcorders and phones with cameras were becoming a lot more accessible during this time, allowing the attackers to record their crime and share it as something funny. These happy slapping videos were shared all over the internet for the whole world to see. As for how this trend initially started, some reports from the time linked them to violent TV shows like Jackass and Dirty Sanchez. A big difference between these shows and the happy slapping videos, however, was that everyone on TV consented to enduring the pain on camera. The people filming happy slapping videos, on the other hand, usually targeted complete strangers and bystanders for what they perceived as social clout. As a media expert from that time explained it, "What we see the kids watching these shows doing is thinking, well, maybe I could stage my own scenes of pain and humiliation along these lines. Then with happy slapping, people are drawn in as random victims rather than the kind of voluntary performances we get in the shows that are being copied. I think happy slapping has become a shortcut in the eyes of the slappers to fame and notoriety among the people who see the images circulated on the web or sent to them via their mobile phones." And while that was already bad enough on its own, things quickly took an even darker turn. As time went on, the recordings became increasingly violent, likely in an effort to outdo one another and stand out in the sea of dozens, if not hundreds of similar videos. Things went from humiliating but physically harmless slaps to coordinated attacks resulting in permanent injuries. One of the worst cases of this happened on August 31st, 2009 in South London. A 67-year-old retired care worker named Ekram Haq left the mosque on Church Lane in Tooting, England after the evening prayer, where he was then approached by two boys, 15-year-old Hamza Lazai and 16-year-old Leon Elcock, wanting to make a happy slapping video. Things quickly spiraled out of control as neither of them held back, resulting in Ekram passing away a week later from a severe head injury he received during the incident. The two were eventually identified and arrested after police reviewed CCTV footage from a nearby camera. Both pled guilty to manslaughter, with Leon receiving a 4.5-year sentence and Hamza sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The happy slapping trend as a whole eventually faded away after the UK and the surrounding countries started treating it as a significant threat to public safety, with France even criminalizing it and giving it a punishment of up to 5 years in prison. Skullbreaker Challenge. On February 14th, 2020, 12-year-old Parker Smith was invited by his friends to film what seemed like a harmless jumping contest with them. He agreed, and on camera jumped the highest he could, but instead of landing safely on his feet, he fell backward and fractured his right arm. He was rushed to the hospital immediately, and fortunately made a full recovery over the following weeks. However, what seemed like a simple accident turned out to be part of a disturbing internet trend his two friends were attempting to recreate. The so-called Skullbreaker Challenge required 3 people to stand in a line and somehow convince the person in the middle to jump. As soon as they did, the two on the outside swept the legs of the one in the middle, who was usually unaware of what was about to happen. This caused them to fall backward, usually on their head, which is where the trend got its name from. It started earlier that year after a video of 2 students from Spain doing it on their friend went viral on social media platforms like TikTok, prompting countless imitators to try and recreate its success. And, as you might imagine, the results were disastrous, with Parker being one of the lucky ones for walking away with just a fractured arm. Many others were knocked unconscious by the impact, suffered from severe concussions, and some even needed multiple stitches across their skull and face. The most devastating of these incidents happened on January 24, 2020 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, when a group of 7th graders attempted the challenge in school. Unfortunately, the victim fell way too hard on their head, causing them to lose consciousness and have a seizure. He luckily survived the incident and eventually recovered without any permanent head trauma. However, his initial condition was bad enough that authorities arrested the other 2 13-year-old boys. They were charged with 3rd-degree aggravated assault and 3rd-degree endangering an injured victim, since the harm they caused was mostly intentional. Now, I wasn't able to find any reports on whether the charges were dropped or
They were just like, yeah, no, we intended to hurt him. We weren't just kidding around. We totally wanted to hurt that guy.
TikTok also stepped in and banned
not
all
what
videos
you
of this
say.
challenge on their platform. Unfortunately, once something is on the internet, it never truly goes away. As evident from 2 girls finding videos of the Skullbreaker Challenge, attempting it on one of their classmates, injuring them, and getting charged for it in November 2022, more than 2.5 years after the original fad ended. Fortunately, there haven't been many reports of kids getting injured because of this challenge ever since. Kia Challenge. Near the end of 2020 and throughout 2021, authorities in Milwaukee, Wisconsin noticed a significant increase in car theft. What made this even stranger was the fact that the majority of these stolen vehicles were either from Kia or Hyundai, with theft of these particular cars doubling or even tripling in some areas compared to previous years. However, before investigators could determine the cause of this surge, the situation spiraled beyond their control in ways they could have never expected. Put simply, stealing Kia and Hyundai cars became an internet trend called the Kia Challenge.
Whoa.
It began on July 12, 2022, when a video captioned "Kia Boys" went viral for demonstrating just how easy it was to steal Kia and Hyundai cars manufactured between 2011 and 2021. All a thief needed was a screwdriver and any regular USB cable, since the connector just so happened to be the perfect size and shape to jumpstart the vehicle. This was a major hardware-level security flaw in dozens of car models, and there was no permanent way to fix the problem either. Now, the original Kia Boys video was eventually taken down by TikTok, but the information was already out there and it already sparked the Kia Challenge. Teenagers across the US started breaking into Kias and Hyundais and posting their stunts on social media to participate in the challenge. While the stolen cars
That's insane. Did anybody just see that video, bro? Those dudes were going off, bro. Props to them, bro, for real. That's a great job. I did shit like that, but I mean, not that crazy. That's fucking nuts.
They began taking the cars for reckless joyrides around town, putting their lives and the lives of everyone else on the road in extreme danger.
Oh my god.
One of these joyrides led to a police chase, which eventually ended with the out-of-control car slamming into the concrete barrier and the teenagers who stole the car trying to flee on foot. The most disturbing of these incidents occurred in Buffalo, New York in October 2022, where a stolen Kia ride ended in a fatal crash, taking the lives of 4 teenagers. In total, the Kia Challenge resulted in the loss of 8 lives before the disturbing trend was shut down by TikTok and other social platforms. Kia and Hyundai also had to settle a class action lawsuit for $200 million over the dangerously lax security in their cars. Car surfing. Car surfing, or riding on the outside of a car as if it were a surfboard, has existed as a trend long before modern social media was even a thing. It started gaining popularity in the early 1990s, compelling teenagers and young adults to speed down the highway while precariously balancing themselves on top. Today, most modern cars don't have much to hang on to on the outside to improve aerodynamics, which makes this already high-risk activity even more deadly. It only takes one small slip for even the most daring car surfer to fall into the road. Something that's evident from a 2008 CDC report, which revealed that 58 people lost their lives while engaging in car surfing, and 41 others were severely injured since 1990. Unfortunately, the rise of social media and the desire to go viral with outrageous stunts have only driven that number higher ever since. Most recently, in May 2023, a 16-year-old boy tragically lost his life while car surfing out the back window of a car when the vehicle lost control and rolled over. He would have almost certainly kept his life if he were in his seat with a seatbelt. Sadly, the car surfing trend is just as alive today as it was 3 decades ago, and shows no signs of fading away anytime soon.
Business tech that's bold, fresh, and delicious.
Get started at easycater.com.
Parents of children who
God
play
damn you
Roblox.
ads.
If your child
We
was
don't
sexually
like the
exploited,
ads.
abused, or pressured to share explicit content by someone they
Blackout Challenge. The Blackout Challenge has existed long before social media. The goal in this challenge is to achieve a brief high that comes from cutting off oxygen to the brain by intentionally suffocating until you lose consciousness. However, while many assume that blacking out from lack of oxygen is perfectly safe in the long run, that couldn't be further from the truth. The rewarding high in this challenge is in reality a dangerous form of cerebral hypoxia, where brain cells are deprived of vital oxygen. This can lead to seizures and hemorrhages. Even if someone survives the challenge seemingly unharmed, depriving the brain of oxygen for just a minute can cause permanent, irreversible damage. This can affect memory, reasoning, and other critical cognitive functions in the long run. The line between a fleeting, dangerous thrill and irreversible tragedy is terrifyingly thin, and once consciousness is lost, there is no way to control the outcome. Not to mention the very real risk of the person never waking up again. Unfortunately, many who try to recreate this challenge are completely unaware of these dangers, resulting in 82 people losing their lives between 1995 and 2007 alone. What makes this even worse is that almost all of these deaths were between the ages of 6 and 19. Much like other viral trends, young impressionable kids are especially drawn in, motivated by peer pressure or the need for validation, online or in real life. Which is why the resurgence of the Blackout Challenge through social media platforms like TikTok brought it to an even younger audience and left a devastating trail of victims. One of the most well-known cases is that of Nyla Anderson, a 10-year-old girl from Pennsylvania. Her family found her unconscious on the bedroom floor on the night of December 7, 2021. They rushed her to the nearby hospital. Unfortunately, it was already too late. After barely clinging to life for 5 days, she tragically passed away without ever waking up. No one knew why she would do something like this, until investigators did a forensic analysis of her phone, which revealed she had been viewing videos of the challenge on TikTok. Another tragic instance happened in April 2022 when a 12-year-old boy from the United Kingdom named Archie Battersby suffered catastrophic brain damage after attempting the challenge and passed away months later. And these weren't isolated incidents either. Numerous other children, some as young as 8, suffered a similar fate or other life-altering injuries after attempting this challenge. Sadly, despite social media sites' best efforts to suppress the challenge, it continues to spread to this day.
All right, so we're gonna put on Tales from the not the crypt, the trip. Phew. All right, totally recommend this, guys. Content, it's freaking insane. It's just insane. Okay, okay. 2 hours? No. Not 2 hours. Oh no. Deterra gave this one right? Where's the most horrifying mushroom trip that will haunt you? The most horrifying mushroom trip that will haunt you. Let's get it. Learn about this shit.
So before I get into this, I want to elaborate something about myself. I am 4 years sober currently. I used to be highly addicted to different drugs, and I have experimented with almost every drug you can think of. It destroyed my life, so I got sober, and I'm doing a lot better now. Anyways, before this day, I have taken LSD and mushrooms multiple times in the past. Some good trips and some slightly bad/ego death trips, but nothing compared to what I was about to experience. And I realize now how irresponsible and stupid I was going into work like this. Multiple coworkers, including my boss, can recount their perspectives on this day. It was 3 a.m. I had 3 more hours until I had to go to work. I purposely woke myself up around this time to take a little bit of mushrooms. Like I said, I did it in the past and didn't really expect myself to have a complete mental breakdown from this. I took a few shrooms and I waited about an hour, but nothing was happening, so I took more and more. And eventually, I took the entire bag of mushrooms, telling myself that whatever happens, I would be able to handle it. Since I have experienced it in the past, I would know how to navigate it.
Not a good way to go.
Definitely not. I thought it was a good idea to take it before I went to work, but I did. I was struggling mentally at the time because I was struggling with addiction. At first, I didn't really feel anything still. I just saw very small visuals, like colors popping out of my phone screen very vibrantly, and my body felt really good. But for whatever reason, I stupidly decided I would take a single LSD strip on top of the entire bag of mushrooms. I planned on staying home from work if I started to have anxiety or whatnot, but I legit did not feel anything up until 5 minutes before I was supposed to drive to work. I lived with my mother at the time, and she works at the same company as me. She was already awake getting ready. I went downstairs to go and just talk to her. She was outside smoking a cigarette, and so I joined her. I thought to myself that I was acting completely normal, but I found everything hysterically funny for some reason, and I did realize that my heart was racing a bit, but other than that, I felt fine and didn't really feel anything negative. But something set me off. My mother spontaneously looked at me and asked, "Are you okay, son?" And I looked back at her and my smile faded and I said, "Yes, why?" And she said, "I'm just wondering." I thought it was odd she asked me that randomly, but I was like, whatever, and I went back inside and sat on the couch. And a few minutes later, she followed me inside and said once again, "Are you sure you're okay?" I was confused and said, "I'm fine, Mom. Why are you asking me that?" And what she said completely set me off and derailed me in a negative way. She said, "Because you look like you're going to have a stroke, go look at yourself in the mirror." My heart dropped and I immediately started having anxiety, but I went to go look at myself and I did notice that my eye was drooping a bit.
This is some wild shit, bro.
I immediately started feeling the full force of the effects of the drugs I took.
This is some wild shit.
I started having a complete panic attack, thinking I was
This is hitting
laced,
close
and I was
home
genuinely
because
having a
I've done
stroke.
this shit before, so
She
I
then
understand.
asked me, "Did you take anything?" And I lied and told her no and walked past her to go sit down because everything started to get blurry and I felt as if I was going to black out.
That's not a good thing.
At this point, I started praying. I am a believer, and I asked God silently to please not let the drugs I took been laced somehow. But the feeling of complete dread did not go away, and so I told my mother that I felt really sick and that I might pass out. She asked me again, but a bit upset this time, "What did you take?" And I told her again I didn't take anything. And she looked me in the eyes and said, "I need to know right now if you took anything." I was panicking, so I admitted to her that I took an entire bag of mushrooms and LSD. She completely lost it and got mad at me and said, "What the hell are you thinking? You gotta go to work. Who did you get it from?" And I told her a random person. We went back and forth and she debated on calling an ambulance because she was also convinced I was laced. She used to do drugs as well, so she's used to stuff like this. But we both calmed down and I told her I just needed water. She told me I absolutely could not miss work or that I would be fired and that I needed to just calm down and act like nothing happened and just go to work. So I decided I couldn't get fired, so I needed to go to work. This was absolutely the worst decision of my life.
Oh my god.
We were driving to work and my mother kept telling me not to talk to anyone, and if I had to keep the conversation short and professional. I agreed, and at this point I wasn't having as much anxiety. I was just trying to make sure I was going to keep my head on straight. We arrived at the job parking lot and she asked me if I was going to be okay. I hesitated, but I said I would be fine. I hoped. By the way, we both work at a defense company, which I will not be naming for my own sake. So I can understand how important my work is and the amount of professionalism that is required.
And you're dropping that much acid,
My mom and I went our
homie?
separate ways.
I mean,
and
I'm not
found out
hating,
that
but
I
like,
immediately
fuck.
had to go to a meeting first thing in the morning. So I gathered my bearings and took a deep breath and went to my work laptop and began to log in. At this point, I started seeing extreme visuals. I was trying to type my password into my computer, but the numbers looked as if they were flying off the keyboard and the screen was changing colors. I whispered to myself that I'm going to be okay, that I've been through this before and it will pass. I just need to get through this day. Eventually, after 5 tries, I finally was able to log into my work computer and clock in. I stood up and was going to start walking to the meeting room, but when I stood up, I started having extreme vertigo. Like if you have ever seen the movie Hunger Games where Katniss was stung by the wasps and she was hallucinating, that's exactly how I felt when I stood up. I sat back down and was thinking what I could do to calm down. I decided I needed to go get some water first and I'd go to the meeting, so I went to the break room and chugged an entire bottle of water, but it absolutely did not help. I went to the meeting and I put on my work glasses, which were shaded so that my coworkers wouldn't see my pupils. During the meeting, my boss was talking about the goals for the day, and as I was listening, it felt as if everybody in the room was watching me, and I had really bad paranoia. Every time I looked at one of my coworkers, it was as if they were already looking at me. I also could not completely understand what my boss was saying. His words sounded mumbled and in a deep, low voice. Thankfully, I made it through the meeting without any issues and without anyone questioning me. I went back to my workstation and I began to start my work, and I had to bring the cart of parts out to the main floor. I worked in a room where I was mainly by myself except for 2 other guys, so I was basically isolated, which made me feel better, but I had to bring my parts to the main floor to identify them. So I pushed the cart out of the ID station and I put my headphones in and tried to listen to music while I worked. But the music, regardless of the song, was like echoing in my ears and it made me feel dizzy. So I took the headphones off and just did my work in silence. The building is pretty loud since I work in production and assembly, so there was many loud noises going on everywhere and I felt very overstimulated. There were 2 of my coworkers in front of the station I was at doing their own work, and they were talking to each other and joking and laughing at stuff I couldn't hear. So I just avoided eye contact and tried to ID my parts, but when I lifted up one of the parts, it felt as if gravity increased tenfold. I almost dropped the part, and both of my coworkers stopped and looked at me and kind of raised their eyebrows in a way like, what is up with him? All of a sudden, a huge wave of fear overcame me.
Oh no.
And I started overthinking and thought to myself that the company knew I was on drugs and they had called the police and I was gonna go to prison since I came to work high. As soon as I was thinking this, I turned around and saw an executive director walking in my direction. They are a very important person at my company. It confirmed my fears and I thought he was coming for me, so I immediately stopped what I was doing and began to walk in the other direction. I thought it was a good idea to lock myself in the private bathroom for a few minutes while I gathered myself. I went into the bathroom and shut the door and locked it. I was hyperventilating and having a complete panic attack. This is the moment where the trip seemed like its peak, and I began to completely lose my mind in the bathroom. I started hearing voices in my head telling me and convincing me that I was the devil incarnate and that I was an evil person, that the reason the world is such an evil and cruel place was because of me. I began to have extreme vertigo. Everything seemed like it was moving and alive. The walls felt like they were watching me, and the floor looked like it was rotating. Every time I moved my eyes, it's like everything moved in slow motion and repetitive motion. I actually started crying. I was sitting in the bathroom regretting my decision, and I kept hearing these voices in my head telling me I was a disgrace and an evil person. I was convinced and believed it. Then suddenly, everything went completely silent and felt very still and stationary. I started having these visions or hallucinations that the world was about to end and that in a few seconds a nuclear bomb will hit us and I would die, and this is where I'd be forever. I felt as if I leave the bathroom, I would be in a completely different dimension, but at the same time, I felt as if I wouldn't be able to leave the bathroom at all, that I was stuck here, and this is my eternity. I was stuck in this bathroom, and I wouldn't be able to leave because this is where I died, and I was here forever. I began to literally bawl out crying, shaking, and I started praying, asking God to remove this, that I'd never do drugs again, and pleading for God to help me, but nothing happened. It kept increasingly getting worse and worse, and I felt as if I was going to explode and would go back and forth from looking at myself in the mirror to sitting on the toilet debating what I should do, or if I could even do anything at all. I mean, I literally lost my mind in this bathroom. I took my phone out and called my mother, who was in the other side of the building in the office area. She didn't respond, so I texted her and asked her to help me. Then 5 minutes later, she called me and was like, "Are you okay?" My voice was shaky and crying, and replied and said, "No, Mom, I'm really not okay, and I need you to come get me." She replied and said, "I don't even know where you are. I cannot come get you. You need to calm down and go back to work. You'll be fine." I replied and said, "No, you really don't understand, Mom. I'm actually not okay right now, and I need to go to the hospital or something. I need to leave." She began to get angry and said, "You deserve everything that's happening to you right now." And that made my trip absolutely 100% worse. I began to just cry on the phone, and she didn't say anything for a minute, and then she said, "Why did you do this, son?" I kept crying, and she said, "Meet me in the long main hallway." So I wiped my tears and walked out of the bathroom and went to where she said. She was waiting for me, but there were 2 other guys waiting behind her, and I stopped in my tracks and my heart started pounding. And I was thinking to myself that this is it. Everyone knows, and I'm about to go to prison or die. She waved for me to come towards her, and I hesitated, but then I did, and she told me she would drive me home, but once I sobered up, I needed to come back to work. I agreed, and the 2 guys behind us were mad dogging me, looking at me crazy, which terrified me for some reason. She told me to go grab my things and meet her outside, so I went back to my workstation, completely ignoring everybody that tried to talk to me, and grabbed my bag and walked out. I texted my boss and told him I was having a panic attack and needed to go home. He replied immediately and said, "I understand, sir." That was the last thing I remembered. Later the next few days, I admitted to my boss in HR what I did, and they genuinely actually seemed concerned for me and had mercy on me and recommended me to rehab and therapy, which I did end up going to. Later, my coworkers told me their perspective, that I was walking around mumbling and crying and walking into doors and walls, and everyone was worried about me. I will never forget the way I felt in that bathroom, and I never touched drugs since.
Good on this guy. He had a life-changing experience. Maybe in a positive way. All right. Interact. Boop. Dead browser is still powering the web. We already watched that the other day, I think. Cocaine devoured this man's entire life. Nah. The most depraved meth psychosis stories ever told. That's interesting.
James
That's
believes
interesting right
keeping
there.
a close watch on his spending helps him resist temptation. By tracking spending in the Wells Fargo mobile app,
Rock and
James wins
roll.
again.
Yeah. Rock and roll.
You hungry?
Starving.
Some call it picky.
No tomatoes. I got you.
We call it perfect. Because sometimes
Fuck this shit.
This video is not intended to encourage drug use.
Oh,
The sole purpose of
fuck
these videos
you.
is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video.
I hate when they do that. Just like fucking having a seizure. This is some trippy, like, intro that really.
Yep, that intro recorded at Epstein's Island. Confirmed.
I've been abusing methamphetamine pills for the past 2 years or so. Things had really started to get out of control during the last few months. My relationship was falling apart, and my partner asked me to leave our home until I was clean. I had nowhere to go, so I took all of my belongings and drove 8 hours to a friend's house. I had many misadventures along the way, but that is part of a different story. Unbeknownst to me, my friend was also a recovering stimulant addict. He also is a medical professional and a fellow psychonaut. We took LSD and shrooms together over the course of 3 days. Without judgment, this friend of mine showed me how to use the power of psychedelics in ways I'd never been able to achieve on my own. He gently guided me to confront my addiction issues, and by the time I left his home 1 week later, I had dumped my entire stash and was committed to never touching any drugs other than weed or psychs ever again, or so I thought. I came home to my partner, who accepted me with open arms, as long as I could stay clean. She said she had the man she fell in love with back. I started a new job a few weeks later. This is when I should have spotted the warning signs that I may have been a bit overconfident in my abilities to beat this addiction overnight. Once I got back into the daily grind, getting up at 5 a.m. and working every single day, I didn't have any cravings for stimulants. However, I was still craving something. I was smoking at least 1/8 of weed a day. I started to take kratom every day before work to get up and moving early in the morning. I would typically order my drugs online from plugs I had met over the years. I was looking for a good price and some good weed, and took a chance ordering from a vendor that I was familiar with, but had not done much business with in the past. This is where everything starts to fall apart again. I got the package in the mail, and when I opened it, I was surprised to find about a quarter bag of crystal meth. I contacted the vendor, who had some bullshit excuse about how he mixed up his packs and he would reship my weed. This vendor knew that I was trying to get clean off of stims, and he told me I should flush the bag immediately. I should have taken his advice. Of course, I did not. My plan was to sell his bag to an acquaintance and make some extra money, so I held on to it for a few days until I could meet up with the guy and make the sale. The next morning, crawling out of bed at 5 a.m., my old addict brain possessed me again. Might as well just have a little line before work, one last hurrah, no one will know but you, and plus you're getting rid of it all in a couple days anyway. I did a small line, felt that old familiar feeling kick in. Even while I was chopping up the line, I remember thinking to myself, this is a horrible mistake, but the addict side won. After work, I decided to redose. I cut up a fat line this time. I did not have much experience with pure crystal and was used to taking pressed pills. I'm not sure how much I actually dosed the second time, but I knew as soon as it went up my nose that it was way too much. I didn't sleep that night, but I had been overstimmed so many times. I knew that as long as I didn't redose, I'd get through the day and be able to crash the second night. No sleep came the second night either, or the third night. That is when I became concerned because the meth should have been out of my system by then. It was on the evening of the 4th day that the hallucinations began. The first thing I remember is laying on my bed and reaching for a cup of water on my nightstand. I went to grab it and my hand passed right through. The strangest confusion washed over me. I tried to grab it again, and even though I could see the cup clear as day, my hand passed through like Patrick Swayze in Ghost. I looked away and looked back, and the cup was still there. Even when I knew it was a hallucination, I could not unsee it. Then the shadow people. Creeping out of my closet in the corners of my bedroom were the outlines of these entities slowly floating toward me. They looked like they were wearing hoodies and had no faces, but they felt intelligent and I could sense nothing but pure evil emanating from them. I started getting really worried and figured I should probably go to the hospital, but this meant I had to confess to my partner. I'd gone behind her back and relapsed. I'd been playing it off as if I was sick up to this point, but decided I needed to confess. I told her I believed I had entered meth-induced psychosis and I might need to go to the hospital. She was very upset with me. We weighed the pros and cons of going to the emergency room. I didn't want to be locked up in a mental ward and knew if I was able to just fall asleep, I would wake up right as rain. My partner was so upset with me, she basically said I put myself in this situation, and if I want to go to the hospital, then I can call for an ambulance myself. I should mention that I probably downplayed the severity of my psychosis as to not freak her out and to lessen the blow of having broken my promise to stay clean once again to her. I decided I would try to sleep it off one more night. This is when I truly broke away and lost all touch with the real world. I remember thinking that my friend had directed a movie that he never told me about, and it was on YouTube, and I decided to put it on. The plot had something to do with multiple intersecting stories of these characters trying to survive an apocalyptic event. There was some kind of huge explosion that decimated most of the Earth. To my delight, my friend had based one of the characters in the film on me and another one of our friends. He also had based a character on himself. My character had called my two friends and we made plans to meet at his house and try to ride out the apocalypse together. This slowly started to change perspectives. I was no longer watching the plot unfold in a movie. I was now experiencing the movie as the character that was based on myself. I met up with one friend we can call Phil by somehow transporting to his house, and then we drove to my other friend's home we can call Bob, who lived in another city. When we got to his house, we entered through a side door. He lived in an attached duplex, and next to him lived an elderly black couple and their two grandchildren. We did not make any contact with them yet, but I could see everything that was unfolding in their home as well, sort of like I was switching back and forth between first person and movie mode. We decided to hunker down and smoke some weed at Bob's house. The next thing I remember, I could see the entire destroyed Earth reconstruct itself. The world went from complete ruin back to normal in a matter of seconds, and there was some sense that this was a digital world, like when you die in a video game and then restart at the save point. However, we didn't get to rejoin the world, and we were stuck in this apocalyptic dimension, looking down over the pristine Earth that went about its business as if nothing happened. All of the people who had died in the apocalypse were reset in the exact positions that they were in when the world ended, and were none the wiser anything had occurred at all. This included alternate versions of ourselves that got to finish living our lives while we were trapped in this purgatory. It turns out that the family that lived next to Bob were trapped in purgatory with us as well. There is an entire subplot that is very fuzzy to me now that involved us going back to Earth and murdering our own replacements and living out their lives, but each time we did, the apocalypse would happen again and we would end up in the exact situation. After some kind of eternity, myself, Phil, Bob, and Bob's neighbors had all accepted our fates. We were trapped in purgatory in this desolate wasteland forever. Then a new plot development occurred. The old man that lived next to Bob used to be a brilliant engineer and had all sorts of blueprints and science books in his basement. He had regretted wasting his life away with drinking and had let his great mind go to waste. Additionally, Bob and the oldest daughter that lived next door ended up having children, and somehow their children had children. We had used the old man's books and blueprints to reinvent the battery. We were then able to harness electricity and use it to watch the film that I thought my friend Phil had directed, which was the delusion I was currently living out. The old man preached to his children and great-grandchildren about how they should not waste their brains and to not follow in his footsteps. Then he would tell tales of the old world and would show the film. Some time had passed and we had repopulated this desolate land with hundreds of people, but they were all deformed from inbreeding and they didn't look completely human. They resembled something like orcs from the Lord of the Rings. They turned watching Phil's movie into a sort of ritual, and eventually an entire religion was built upon it. Meanwhile, the old man passed away, but the youngest of his granddaughters continued to work endlessly on one of the inventions he had written a blueprint for. This device was completed, and then we somehow used it to open a portal down to Earth. Another device was invented that created glowing orbs that were human souls. It became our job to create all the new souls and send them down to Earth. These souls knew of Phil's movie and of us, and we became the gods and goddesses of a new religion for all of humanity. One of the orbs was the Messiah, and we put Jesus on Earth. Our intentions were always good, and we hoped for peace.
Cancer care isn't just about treating the disease. It's also about helping people live well during and after treatment. At MSK, we don't just treat cancer, we treat people.
After thousands of years, we had finally somehow figured out how to get to heaven. We had been trapped in limbo for so long. Heaven was through some sort of portal, and when you went through, you would stay there for 10,000 years and then return. The catch was that you can only go one time, but the experience was pure bliss and ecstasy. I didn't want to experience heaven without my partner and our son, so I had to wait for them to die and join me in limbo. They said when they finally came, it was magical, and I sobbed when I saw them again, and we all walked into heaven together. The next thing I remember, the movie was over, and I was very confused. I kept peeking out the blinds to see if the outside world looked normal, or if the apocalypse had actually happened. I assumed that it must have happened, and that I was now in heaven with my partner, as she was laying next to me. I woke her up and tried to explain to her that we were dead and to not go outside. I still don't think she understood the extent of my psychosis at that point, because I could recognize her and where I was, and she got up and went to work. The series of the next set of delusions are all sort of jumbled together. I'm not sure if they were happening simultaneously, or if I was experiencing them in some sort of linear fashion. For a time, I was living at my father's house. He had modified his home to fit a strange new lifestyle. This involved being in constant flow with the sun. You would wake up each day and look into a mirror that reflected sunlight into your eyes for 20 seconds immediately each morning. When you slept, you would be snuggled against this strange pliable rod that would keep you in constant motion, rolling you over slowly. You would sleep every 4 hours for an hour. There was an alarm system that went off and played the same song when it was time to wake up. The song was by some really popular teeny bopper band that dressed up in Barney-style creature costumes. When you were not sleeping, you would be outside in constant sunlight. There were activities you would do until the sleep alarm went off. Each activity involved some sort of sun ritual-based exercise. At one point, I was trying to sleep on the couch that had an electric stovetop inside of the cushions. I kept turning it on and burning myself, and it was painful and terrifying. There was a tractor on my father's property, and I took it for a joyride at night. I drove into town and stumbled upon a festival that seemed to be related to a holiday like Thanksgiving. All of the townspeople were gathered along the main street. I came across a group of police officers on a tall hill above the crowd. There was a giant pig they had on a leash. They were going to have a stuntman ride the pig down the hill and into the crowd of people. This was some kind of tradition that was held annually. I took it upon myself to hop on the pig and took it for an exhilarating joyride. The cops found it amusing, and the crowd all cheered when I made it all the way down the hill. I made a big speech into a microphone and then went back to the house. They had captured the entire thing on film, and I was able to share it with my family. This is when my fiancée may have returned home because she was there with me at my dad's house. She kept telling me that it wasn't my dad's house, and I would be confused, and it would turn back into our house for just a moment and then back to my dad's. This is when I could feel my brain start to melt. I started to lose all cognitive function. It felt like an invalid. I was convinced I would have to live the rest of my life this way, or until I became a vegetable. Then my brother showed up. He was using some kind of drug and had moved into my house to take care of me. I kept finding dirty needles all over the place. I didn't trust him. I then walked into my room and caught him in bed with my partner, and they both had a dirty look of guilt on their faces. I had lost most of my brain by then, was aware that I was very confused. I was convinced I just walked in on my own brother with my woman and began to get very upset. My fiance was insisting it didn't happen and said she had to take me to the hospital. I thought she was lying.
Alright, well, I'm gonna,
then
just since
decided
this
to
isn't
call my mother
gaining
because
too
she
much
would know the
interest, I'm
truth.
going to be ending this
I called,
stream
and luckily
for
she
now. This is
answered
already
and
an
told me
hour. I
that
didn't
my
even mean
partner
to
would
start
never
this
do that
one.
to me, and that I should
Oh, wow,
trust her
no, I
word.
didn't mean to start an hour-long video. But if anybody out there has seen this stream, please follow me on all platforms, and I will be live again tonight, probably around 11 o'clock.